how's it going? Today I wanted to talk about the Austrian Grand Prix because, well, A, what a race that was, and B, there was some controversy, and there was some very dramatic moments in the sprint race as well, which I will get into. Um, but yeah, overall, I just wanted to know your thoughts really and have a discussion. So, without further ado, we started with the sprint race. Um, which was again very entertaining. Um, for the most part, obviously, not a lot happened after the main incident, but well, first of all, qualifying was incredibly exciting. Just having this many teams so close on obviously a very short track, so the margins are already going to be tight. It's just further emphasized by how competitive the grid is this year, um, which I think we have been taking for granted just because the results have been leaning towards Max a lot of the time, but it does on the surface level take away from genuinely how close the grid is. Um, but yeah, again, qualifying just highlighted that, and then we had that amazing battle at the start of the sprint between the two McLarens and Max. Oh, what an opening lap that was. It was just absolutely mesmeric. The way the DRS zones worked and the way the slipstream worked, and it didn't just last for one corner or one straight. It was absolutely just nip and tuck for the entire lap. And the way Oscar just sprung out that surprise around the outside of Norris, extremely unexpected. But all credit to him. I think in a full format race, I think McLaren would have switched them because I think Lando did have better pace. But I think the fact that it was a sprint race and that there's only 1 point in it, I think that played a big factor in keeping them in the order that they were in. Um, just to avoid drama and tension between the drivers. Um, but yeah, amazing battle. Then we had the battle with Sainz coming through as well. That was an absolutely incredible move. Um, Pity that Ferrari have been off the boil this weekend. But still, that did not rob us of some action. Leclerc, as always, getting very bad luck. Obviously, he made that mistake in qualifying, which is only his mistake, and he was one of the first, I believe, to be punished by the gravel traps that have been put in place, which I cannot praise the FIA enough for putting that in place. Us fans have been begging it for years, around every track, but around Austria especially, because it is one of the ones with such fast flowing corners with lots of runoff, so people are just naturally going to go wide all the time in side by side battles, especially. And us fans have been saying for years, just put gravel there. They either won't go there because it's going to slow them down, or if they do go wide, then they won't need a penalty because they'll have been slowed down anyway. It will make side by side battling a lot fairer, and it will make track limits a much less of a big deal. And this weekend really showed off how much that actually works. So fingers crossed the FIA take this into account, and it can start a running trend hopefully for tracks across the calendar. But yeah, then that was most of the drama for the sprint race. Of course, Max won eventually, a fairly comfortable victory. So then I can't speak for all of us, of course, but personally, for me, expectations were lowered for the full Grand Prix. I thought Red Bull had much better pace than McLaren, and my worries were kind of cemented when we saw qualifying in that Max remembered who he was and just decided to dominate. But by no means am I saying it's all the car. We saw how much Perez was struggling, and has been struggling for most of the season. So I'm not taking anything away from Max. His laps was possibly the best lap of the season. I'd go far as to say one of the best in recent times. It was absolutely magic to have that margin, that extent of dominance on this short circuit. It was absolutely incredible. And the onboard, it just shows how hooked up that car is and how much it's speaking to him as a driver, and the confidence he has just to get every line millimeter perfect. I'm a Lewis fan, but I have to praise Max for his skill because, yeah, it's really a joy to watch when he's on the edge. And then we move into the race, where, let's be honest, not a lot happened for the first 50 odd laps. We had the opening lap, which was very clean, surprisingly, but still with, a lot of action. But you know what? Because there were obviously there was strategy because there were multiple stops. I think a lot of teams were on 2 stops and 3 stops, which was amazing to see. But this was one of the rare occasions where it didn't amount to a necessarily, higher amount of action. But fear not, because the action came on lap 51, where the top two pit at exactly the same time. Max with about a 7 second gap at this point, I believe. But then his pit stop was about 4 seconds slower than McLaren's. So Lando was probably within 2 or 3 seconds, I think, coming out of the pit. And then obviously Max isn't used to this amount of pressure this season, and having cars that close to his rearview mirror. So he made a mistake. And then I can't quite tell exactly what happened because I was watching the Channel 4 highlights, and they chose a very poor point to edit, where Max made that mistake. They cut to an advert. Lando still wasn't within DRS, and then after the adverts, he was within half a second. So I don't know if Max got a flat spot, or if Lando just had better pace on the fresher tyres. But either way, they were together on track, and what a battle that was. The way it was bubbling up for laps and laps and laps. It wasn't immediate, it wasn't just, Max being aggressive, he doesn't want to concede the leads, he's just crashed into Norris. It was, we had some properly good side-by-side moments for many corners during that last 20 laps. Lando was sending it, Max was complaining without reason, by the way. He said it's no way over to take, when he's pretty much built a career out of it. So I thought that was a bit ironic, but, funny. And then it just all came to a climax where Lando was on the outside, Max was squeezing back over to the racing line, expecting Lando to back out, but he was more than alongside enough. In my opinion, I think the penalty was perfectly justified. Even though Max has always been aggressive, he's usually got incredible spatial awareness of where his car is and awareness of kind of predicting what the driver's going to do, and how far he can push the rules without causing an incident. But this was just one of the few and rare lapses in judgment, I think, for Max. I think he's possibly too used to drivers fearing him, like Lewis did in 2021, where they were side by side, and Lewis either had to stick behind or wait for an easy DRS overtake or much fresher tyres to, have a huge advantage in pace to, fully make a move stick on Max. Because otherwise he just knew Max would send him wide or there would be a crash. Whereas in more recent times, with Oscar, Lando, Leclerc, they've been much less willing to play Max's games and, play by his rules, which has been amazing to see. Charles got the better of Max a lot of the times in 2022, I think it was. Saudi Arabia springs to mind particularly. But yeah, I think this just goes to show that the younger drivers do not fear him. And I think even though Lando was very unfortunate well, they were both very unfortunate, let's be honest, to get punches from that very light contact. I think the penalty was very fair, and credit to the stewards, they were absolutely on point this race. I think every penalty given was often black and white, with the pit lane entries and things and track limits. But we've seen the mess that up even the most obvious of decisions in the past. So I am going to praise them for this race because they were very consistent, and very fair. So yeah, I'd love to know what you think, but obviously it paved the way for George Russell to come through. What a result that was! What a feel-good moment that was! Obviously, Toto misjudged slightly on when to motivate George, because obviously when he's in the lead with 5 laps to go, he's fully aware of the bigger picture and what's at stake. But it was just so wholesome and hilarious at the end when George said how excited Toto was, and Toto just admitted, and it was all jokes afterwards, which I don't know if it would have been had the result been different, but they won, so that's all that matters, and it was very funny to hear that. But yeah, his second race in his career, I'm amazed it's only been his second. It feels like he's had more, to be honest. But he drove a brilliant race. He'd been outperforming Hamilton for much of the weekend. And as he said, he was there to pick up the pieces. He predicted at the start of the weekend that something would have to go wrong for the front two for Mercedes to, be up front. But that's what's happened, and he drove a perfect race and was able to reap the rewards. Sorry. So yeah, extremely happy for him. Extremely happy for Mercedes. But yeah, please, I would love to know what you thought of the incident, of the race in general, of the season, because, who'd have thought that this season would be as exciting as it's turned out to be, after the dominance we had to suffer last year. I feel like even Max fans were getting a bit bored of the results, but this year has been far from boring. Of course, coming up to a reg change, it was probably only going to get better until the new regs change everything and one team finds a silver bullet and is dominant once again. But maybe that's pessimistic of me, but that's been the trend for the past few decades, really. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed that race. I certainly did. I'm off to watch the darts now, which has been taking up a lot of my weekend. So if that interests you, then I would love to speak to you about that as well later. If not, then we've got the final triple header for the F1 next week at Silverstone, my home race, a lot of the drivers and teams' home races, which is going to be shown live on Channel 4, so hopefully I can speak to you pretty much as soon as it ends, because I think we're going to be in for a banger. Silverstone often is. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful event. So, yeah, extremely excited for that. I hope you're doing very well, and I will speak to you soon. Goodbye.